When I was 14, my parents told me to grow up and stop being a burden, then left me at a truck stop in the desert. I never spoke to them again until my sister's wedding invitation arrived 17 years later. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I could bring myself to open it. Cream-colored, expensive cardstock with my name written in elaborate calligraphy. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting on the inner envelope. My hand shook as I pulled out the wedding invitation. Brianna Hayes requests the honor of your presence at her marriage to Christopher Lang. My younger sister was getting married, and somehow, after 17 years of silence, they had found me. I stood there in my townhouse in Portland, Oregon, staring at those words until they blurred. The last time I had seen Brianna, she was 10 years old, crying in the back seat of our family station wagon while our parents drove away from me. The memory still burned like acid in my chest. That summer, I was 14, and we were driving from Seattle to Phoenix to visit our grandparents. My mother, Denise, had been complaining about me for the entire 6-hour drive. I was too moody, too quiet, too expensive with my constant need for new clothes because I was growing. My father, Gerald, mostly stayed silent behind the wheel, occasionally grunting in agreement. I'm so tired of this attitude, my mother said, turning around in the passenger seat to glare at me. All you do is mope and complain. Do you have any idea how much stress you put on this family? I'd been looking out the window, trying to disappear into myself the way I had learned to do. Brianna sat beside me, small and scared, pretending to be asleep. I didn't say anything. I managed to whisper. That's exactly the problem. You never say anything. You just sit there making everyone uncomfortable with your presence. My mother's voice had that sharp edge that meant she was building up to something worse. You need to grow up and stop being such a burden on everyone. My father took an exit I didn't recognize. We were somewhere in the middle of the Arizona desert, miles from anything. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and red. He pulled into a truck stop, one of those places that's just a gas station and a small diner in the middle of nowhere. Get out, he said. I thought maybe we were just stopping for dinner or gas. But when I climbed out of the car, my father pulled my backpack from the trunk and dropped it at my feet. You want to act like we're such a burden to you? Fine, figure it out yourself. His face was completely blank, like I was a stranger asking for directions rather than his daughter. Dad? My voice cracked. What are you doing? You're smart. You're old enough. Time to learn what real problems look like. My mother didn't even look at me. She was checking her lipstick in the visor mirror. Brianna's face appeared in the back window, her mouth open in a silent scream. She was pounding on the glass, but my father was already getting back in the car. I ran after them as they drove away, my backpack forgotten on the ground behind me. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, until the taillights disappeared completely into the desert twilight. Then I walked back to the truck stop and sat on the curb outside the convenience store, trying to understand what had just happened. A trucker named Bill found me there 2 hours later, still sitting in the same spot. He was a grandfather himself, and something about the way I looked must have concerned him. When he asked where my parents were and I couldn't answer, when I started shaking so hard I couldn't stop, he called the police. The cops who showed up didn't believe my story at first. Parents don't just abandon their kids at truck stops. There had to be some misunderstanding. But when they couldn't reach my parents at any of the numbers I gave them, when they found my backpack with my school ID inside, the officers' expressions changed. I spent that night in a hotel room with a social worker named Karen Briggs. She had kind eyes and bought me dinner from a local Mexican restaurant, but I couldn't eat. I kept thinking my parents would come back, that this was some horrible lesson and they'd appear any minute to take me home. They never came. The investigation took weeks. Police finally tracked my parents down at my grandparents' house in Phoenix. They told everyone I'd run away because I was going through a difficult phase. My mother cried to the officers, playing the part of the devastated parent perfectly. My father backed up every word, but Brianna told the truth. My 10-year-old sister, terrified and small, told the social workers exactly what happened. Our parents never forgave her for that. Child Protective Services wanted to press charges, but my parents had expensive lawyers who argued it was a misunderstanding, a momentary lapse in judgment during a stressful family trip. The fact that they'd driven 6 more hours to Phoenix without me. That they'd spent 3 days there before the police contacted them. That my mother had told her own parents I was staying with a friend back in Seattle somehow didn't matter enough. I was placed with a foster family in Tucson. The Martins were good people, empty nesters who had been fostering teens for years. Patricia Martin taught high school English, and her husband Frank was a librarian. They gave me my own room, helped me enroll in school, and never once made me feel like an obligation. The system tried to reunite me with my parents. There were mandatory counseling sessions where my mother cried and apologized, where my father sat with his arms crossed and refused to engage. During one particularly brutal session, the therapist asked him directly why he'd left me. She needed to learn some independence, he said, like abandoning your child in the desert was some kind of character-building exercise. Kids today are too soft. They need tough love. The therapist asked what I needed to do to come home. My mother looked at me with tears streaming down her face and said, "You need to apologize for all the trouble you've caused. You need to show us you can be part of this family without all the drama." I was 14 years old, sitting in a counselor's office, being asked to apologize for my own abandonment. Something inside me went very cold and very quiet. "I don't want to go back," I said clearly. "I want to stay with the Martins." My mother's tears stopped instantly. Her face hardened into something I barely recognized. "Fine, if that's what you want, you're no daughter of mine." The state terminated their parental rights 6 months later. I never saw them again. The Martins helped me through high school. Patricia tutored me when I struggled with algebra, and Frank taught me how to research college scholarships. They came to my band concerts and my debate team competitions. They cried when I graduated as valedictorian. I went to the University of Arizona on a full academic scholarship, studied finance, and graduated summa cum laude. The Martins were in the front row at my graduation. My biological parents weren't invited and wouldn't have come anyway. After college, I got a job at an investment firm in Phoenix, then moved to Portland for a better position. I bought my townhouse at 26, paid off my student loans at 28, and made senior analyst at 30. The Martins remained in my life, the only parents I claimed. Patricia died of a heart attack when I was 29. Frank followed her 2 years later. I'd had them in my life for 17 years, and losing them broke something in me I didn't know could still break. I thought about Brianna over the years. My little sister, who told the truth when it mattered. I'd searched for her name online occasionally, but she had no social media presence I could find. My parents had likely kept her offline or used privacy settings to prevent me from locating her. The system had allowed it because they technically still had rights to her, and she'd been a minor. Now she was 27 and getting married, and somehow she had tracked me down. The wedding was in Seattle at one of those expensive hotels with views of Puget Sound. The invitation requested an RSVP 3 months in advance. I had 12 weeks to decide if I was going to walk back into the family that had thrown me away. I called my therapist, Dr. Angela Reeves, the day after I opened the invitation. I'd been seeing her for 6 years, working through the complicated mess of abandonment and trust issues that came with my history. "What do you want to do?" she asked after I explained the situation. "I don't know. Part of me wants to see Brianna, see how she turned out, but I can't face my parents." My voice wavered. "They'll be there. They'll walk her down the aisle like they're these loving parents, and everyone will believe it." "You don't owe anyone anything," Dr. Reeves reminded me gently. "Not your sister, not your parents, not even yourself. You get to choose what's right for you." I spent weeks agonizing over the decision. I drafted and deleted a dozen different emails to the wedding coordinator. I looked up Brianna's fiancé online and found a nice-looking guy who worked in software development. I found my parents' current address, still in Seattle, in a house that must have cost over $1 million. They had done well for themselves after getting rid of their burdensome older daughter. 2 months before the wedding, I made my decision. I RSVP'd yes with a +1, even though I didn't have a date. I booked a hotel room, bought a plane ticket, and ordered a new dress. Then I hired a private investigator. His name was Thomas Vance, a former police detective who now ran his own firm. I met him in his office in downtown Portland and laid out exactly what I wanted. I need to know everything about my parents' lives since they abandoned me. Financial records, social media, court documents, everything. I need to know who they told what story to, and I need proof of all of it. Thomas looked at me over his reading glasses. "This is about the wedding. This is about truth," I said. "They've had 17 years to tell their version of events. I want to know what they've been saying." It took him 5 weeks and cost me $8,000, but Thomas delivered. The file he put together was 3 inches thick. My parents had told everyone I'd run away, that I'd been troubled, angry, impossible to manage. They'd played the victims for years, collecting sympathy from friends and family. On social media, my mother posted regularly about the pain of having a child who had chosen to leave and refused contact. There were no mentions of the truth, no acknowledgement of what they'd done. They'd rewritten history completely, and their entire social circle had believed it. But Thomas had found something else. 3 years after they'd abandoned me, my parents had tried to claim me as a dependent on their taxes. They'd filed paperwork stating I lived with them, collected the tax benefits, and pocketed the money. They'd done it for 4 consecutive years before someone at the IRS flagged it. The investigation had been quiet, resulting in fines and back payments, but no criminal charges. It was all documented in federal records that most people would never think to look for. I had leverage. The week before the wedding, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Please read this." It was from Brianna. "I know you probably hate me for not reaching out sooner. I know you might not even come to the wedding, but I need you to know that I never forgot what happened, and I never forgave them for it. I'm only inviting Mom and Dad because Christopher's parents think it would be weird not to have them there. They don't know the real story. Nobody does except me. I've spent 17 years watching them play the victims, and I'm so tired of pretending. I found you 2 years ago, but I was too scared to reach out. I'm sorry. I understand if you don't want anything to do with any of us, but I had to try. Love, Bri." I read that email 20 times. My little sister, all grown up and still carrying the weight of that day in the desert. I wrote back, "I'll be there." The day before the wedding, I flew to Seattle. I checked into my hotel room, unpacked my dress, and reviewed the file Thomas had prepared one more time. Then I drafted an email and saved it to my drafts folder. The wedding was beautiful in that generic, expensive way that Seattle weddings often are. The hotel ballroom overlooked the water, decorated in whites and golds. I arrived early and sat near the back, watching people file in. My parents arrived 20 minutes before the ceremony. My mother wore a pale blue dress that probably cost more than my first car. My father had gray in his hair now, but otherwise looked exactly the same. They worked the room like politicians, hugging people, laughing, playing their parts perfectly. Neither of them noticed me in the back corner. The ceremony itself was short and sweet. Brianna looked beautiful in her wedding gown, and Christopher looked at her like she hung the moon. My father walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, the picture of the proud dad. I felt sick watching it. The reception started with cocktail hour. I stayed near the edges, nursing a glass of wine and watching my parents hold court with a group of relatives I vaguely recognized. They were telling some story that had everyone laughing. Brianna found me during dinner. She had changed from her ceremony dress into her reception gown, something simpler that let her move more easily. She stood in front of me for a long moment, her eyes filling with tears. "You came," she whispered. I said I would. I stood up, and then my little sister was hugging me like she was 10 years old again, like she could hold on tight enough to fix everything that had broken. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed into my shoulder. "I should have fought harder. I should have found you sooner. I should have." "Stop." I pulled back and held her shoulders. "You were a child. None of this was your fault. None of it." She wiped her eyes, mascara smudging. "Mom and Dad don't know you're here. I didn't tell them you RSVP'd. I know. Are you going to talk to them?" I looked across the ballroom to where my parents sat at the head table, laughing at something someone had said. Eventually, Brianna's expression shifted into something harder. "They deserve whatever you're planning." "I know." She squeezed my hand once, then went back to her other guests. I watched her greet people, saw how she carefully avoided bringing anyone over to meet me. She was protecting me even now. I waited until after dinner, after the speeches, after the first dance. I waited until my parents were separated, my mother at the bar and my father smoking a cigar outside with some of the other men. Then I approached my mother. She didn't recognize me at first. Why would she? The last time she'd seen me, I was a scrawny 14-year-old. Now I was 31, wearing a designer dress, my hair professionally styled. "Excuse me," I said pleasantly. "Denise Hayes." She turned, wine glass in hand, her expression politely curious. "Yes? It's nice to finally see you again." Something in my voice must have triggered recognition. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. "What are you doing here? Your daughter invited me to her wedding. Did she not mention it?" People nearby were starting to notice that something was wrong. My mother's voice had gone shrill, attracting attention. "You need to leave. You have no right to be here." "I have every right. I was invited." I kept my voice calm. "Pleasant even. Actually, I was hoping we could chat, catch up on the last 17 years. I'm sure everyone would love to hear about what really happened." "You ran away," my mother hissed, but her eyes were darting around, checking who was listening. "You were impossible and you ran away. Is that really the story you want to go with?" "Because I have quite a bit of documentation that says otherwise." I pulled my phone from my clutch. "Including the police reports from that truck stop in Arizona and the social worker's notes and the transcripts from our family therapy sessions where you demanded I apologize for being abandoned." My mother grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "You little," also, I continued, pulling my arm free, "I have the IRS investigation records from when you fraudulently claimed me as a dependent for 4 years after I was placed in foster care. That's particularly interesting, don't you think? Abandoning your child and then committing tax fraud by pretending she lived with you." The color drained from her face completely. By now, we had a small audience, including my father, who had come back inside. He pushed through the gathering crowd, his face thunderous. "What the hell is going on here?" "Hi, Dad." I gave him a small wave. Long time. He actually stumbled, catching himself on a nearby chair. For just a second, he looked old and confused. Then his face hardened. Denise, we're leaving. Not yet, I said loudly enough that more people stopped to listen. I think we should address the elephant in the room, don't you? I mean, all these people have probably heard so much about your troubled older daughter who ran away. I'd hate for them to keep believing lies. You need to leave before I have you removed, my father said through clenched teeth. Go ahead and try. I'm a guest here. You, however, are about to become very unwelcome. I looked around at the crowd of wedding guests, all staring at us with varying expressions of confusion and concern. How many of you have heard about how I ran away when I was 14? How I was troubled and difficult and just disappeared on my poor parents? Several people glanced at each other uncomfortably. My mother tried to speak, but nothing came out. Would you like to know what actually happened? I pulled up the photos on my phone, images I'd carefully selected from the file Thomas had compiled. When I was 14, my parents drove me to a truck stop in the middle of the Arizona desert and left me there. They drove away while I chased their car. They told everyone I'd run away. That's not true. My mother finally managed to say, she's lying. She's been disturbed for years. I have the police reports, I said clearly. I have the social worker testimony. I have the statements from my 10-year-old sister who witnessed the whole thing and told the truth when the authorities investigated. I have 17 years of documentation proving that you abandoned your child and then spent nearly 2 decades lying about it. The room had gone completely silent except for the distant sound of music from the dance floor. Brianna, someone in the crowd, an older woman I vaguely recognized as my aunt, looked around. Is this true? My sister appeared at the edge of the crowd. She had been watching from a distance. Her face was streaked with tears, but her voice was steady. Every word she said. I was there. I saw them leave her. I told the police exactly what happened, and they've held it against me my entire life. My mother made a sound like a wounded animal. Brianna, how could you? How could I what? Tell the truth. I was 10 years old, and I did the right thing, and you've punished me for it ever since. Brianna moved to stand next to me, and I felt her hand slip into mine. You abandoned your daughter in the desert like garbage and then played the victims for 17 years. Everyone here deserves to know what kind of people you really are. The aunt who had spoken earlier, my mother's sister, stepped forward. Denise, please tell me this isn't true. My mother opened and closed her mouth several times, but my father cut in. This is ridiculous. We don't have to stand here and be attacked by a disturbed young woman, who you claimed as a dependent on your taxes for 4 years after you abandoned her, I said flatly. You committed tax fraud. I have the IRS investigation documents. Would you like me to share those, too? That broke whatever composure my father had left. He grabbed my mother's arm and started pulling her toward the exit. We're leaving, he announced to no one in particular. This is insane, and we won't be part of it. That's what you're good at, isn't it? I called after them. Leaving? They didn't stop. They pushed through the crowd of shocked wedding guests and disappeared through the ballroom doors. The room erupted in whispers immediately. I stood there shaking, adrenaline crashing through my system. Brianna's hand was still in mine, gripping so tight it hurt. Did that really just happen? She whispered. Yeah. Christopher appeared with a hotel manager, both looking concerned. Bri, are you okay? What's going on? Brianna took a shaky breath. Christopher, everyone, I need to explain something. This is my sister. My older sister, who I haven't seen in 17 years because our parents abandoned her at a truck stop when she was 14 and I was 10. Everything you just heard is true. I should have told you all sooner, but I was scared and ashamed and didn't know how. Her fiancé looked between us, processing. Your sister, who supposedly ran away. She never ran away. They left her there on purpose. I saw it happen. To Christopher's credit, he didn't hesitate. He pulled Brianna into a hug, then extended his arm to include me. Then I'm glad you're both here now. The rest of the evening was surreal. Some guests left early, uncomfortable with the drama. Others stayed and asked questions, wanting to hear the full story. I ended up sitting at a table with Brianna, Christopher, and several relatives I barely remembered, going through the details of what happened. My aunt, my mother's sister named Victoria, cried as I explained everything. I knew something was wrong, she kept saying. Denise's story never made sense, but I never pushed. I'm so sorry. You couldn't have known, I told her. They were very convincing. But my own sister, Victoria, shook her head. I should have known. Brianna's friend, her maid of honor named Ashley, looked furious. I've been listening to your mom cry about her troubled daughter for 2 years. She played it up so much before the wedding, talking about how sad she was that you wouldn't be there. Yeah, Brianna said bitterly. That's her specialty. Around midnight, after most guests had left, I sat with Brianna and Christopher in the hotel bar. We'd all kicked off our fancy shoes and loosened up, exhausted from the emotional weight of the evening. "I ruined your wedding," I said quietly. "I'm sorry." "Are you kidding?" Brianna looked at me with fierce eyes. "You freed me. Do you know how many years I've spent carrying their lies? Pretending everything was normal, letting people feel sorry for them." She grabbed my hand across the table. "You stood up there and told the truth in front of everyone. You did what I've been too scared to do for 17 years. Still, this should have been your perfect day." Christopher laughed, surprising both of us. "Nothing about weddings is perfect. But you know what? This story is going to be legendary. Remember when the bride's long-lost sister showed up and exposed the parents who abandoned her? That's way better than remember when Aunt Susan got drunk and hit on the DJ." Despite everything, I found myself laughing. We talked until 3 o'clock in the morning. Brianna told me about her life, about how our parents had controlled everything after I left. She'd gone to the college they chose, studied what they wanted, lived at home until she met Christopher. Even then, they tried to convince her not to get married. They didn't like that Christopher encouraged me to be independent, she explained. They wanted me to stay small and manageable. After what happened with you, they've been terrified of losing control again. "You should have reached out sooner," I said. But there was no anger in it. "I know. I was scared. They monitored everything when I was younger. And then when I finally had freedom, I didn't know how to bridge 17 years of silence." "What do you even say?" "Hey, remember when our parents abandoned you and ruined both our lives? That would have been a good start." She laughed through tears. "I thought about you every single day. I wondered if you were okay, if you hated me, if you'd even want to hear from me. I tried to find you a few times. I admit it. But they'd locked down your social media, and I didn't want to cause problems for you." "You wouldn't have. You could never have." Brianna wiped her eyes. "Tell me everything. Tell me about your life, about who you became." So I did. I told her about the Martins, about Patricia and Frank, who had given me the family I needed, about college and my career, about the townhouse in Portland, and the life I built from nothing, about therapy and healing and learning to trust people again. "You did it," Brianna said with wonder in her voice. "You survived and you thrived. You became amazing without them." "So did you," I pointed out. "You told the truth when it mattered, even though you were just a kid. That took real courage. I've never stopped feeling guilty about it." "Don't. None of this was your fault. You were 10 years old." We exchanged phone numbers, email addresses, social media accounts. Christopher insisted on getting a photo of the three of us together. In the picture, Brianna and I are holding hands, our heads tilted together, both of us crying and laughing at the same time. I flew back to Portland the next day, exhausted but lighter somehow. The file Thomas had compiled sat in my carry-on, physical proof of everything I'd said. I'd made copies and given one to Brianna just in case. 3 days after the wedding, my mother tried to call me. I sent it to voicemail. She left a message that I deleted without listening to it. She tried 5 more times before giving up. My father sent one email. "You've destroyed this family. I hope you're proud of yourself." I wrote back, "You destroyed this family 17 years ago. I just made sure everyone knew about it." He never responded. The fallout was extensive. My parents' social circle fractured as people took sides. Some believed them, convinced I was lying or exaggerating. Others remembered odd inconsistencies in their story over the years and started asking harder questions. Victoria, my aunt, cut off contact with my mother completely. "I can't forgive this," she told me over the phone 2 weeks after the wedding. "What they did to you, what they did to Brianna. I'm so ashamed I didn't see it sooner." "You weren't there," I reminded her. "You couldn't have known. But I should have pushed harder. I should have asked more questions." She paused. "Would it be okay if I stayed in touch? I'd like to get to know you if you're willing." I was. Brianna and I talked every few days, making up for lost time. She told me about her childhood after I left, about the guilt and the control and the constant fear of saying the wrong thing. I told her about the nightmares I still sometimes had, about the therapy and the slow process of healing. "Do you hate them?" she asked me once. I thought about it carefully. "No, I don't think I do anymore. I'm angry about what they did and I'll never forgive them for it. But hate requires too much energy, and they've taken enough from me already." "I think I hate them," she admitted quietly. "Does that make me a bad person?" "It makes you human. Your feelings are valid, whatever they are." 6 months after the wedding, my parents tried one final time to control the narrative. They posted a long statement on social media, claiming I'd lied about everything, that I was mentally unstable and had always been troubled. They painted themselves as victims of a vindictive daughter's campaign. Brianna screenshotted it and posted her own response, including photos of the police reports and social services documents. "This is what actually happened," she wrote. "I was there. I saw everything. These people abandoned their 14-year-old daughter in the desert. And have been lying about it for 17 years. I won't be silent anymore. The post went viral in their social circle. By the end of the week, my parents had deleted their social media accounts entirely. Brianna called me laughing and crying. I did it. I finally stood up to them. I'm proud of you. They're going to disown me now. You know, then you'll be in good company, I said. Welcome to the club. A year after the wedding, Brianna and Christopher moved to Portland. They bought a house 10 minutes from my townhouse. We had dinner together twice a week, slowly building the relationship we should have had all along. Victoria visited regularly, and I met cousins I'd forgotten existed. Some of them apologized for believing my parents' story. Others just wanted to move forward. I accepted both with equal grace. The Martins had left me a small inheritance when they passed. Nothing huge, but enough that I'd been able to pay off my townhouse early. I used some of it to create a scholarship fund in their name for foster kids pursuing higher education. Brianna helped me organize the first annual fundraiser. At the event, surrounded by people who had supported the cause, I gave a speech about the importance of family, both the one you're born into and the one you choose. I talked about Patricia and Frank, about the gift of being seen and valued. I didn't mention my biological parents at all. Brianna stood in the front row, tears streaming down her face, applauding louder than anyone else. 2 years after the wedding, I received a letter from my father. It had been forwarded through several addresses before reaching me. Inside was a single page, his handwriting shaky and unclear. I'm dying. Cancer. Your mother wants to see you before I go. She wants to apologize. Please consider it. Gerald. I showed it to Dr. Reeves during our next session. What do you want to do? She asked. I don't know. Part of me feels like I should go, like there's some obligation to hear her out. The other part knows it won't change anything. You're right. It won't change anything. The question is whether you need closure or if you've already found it. I thought about that for a long time. About the scared 14-year-old girl sitting at a truck stop. About the years of therapy. About Brianna and Victoria and the family I'd rebuilt from scratch. About the life I'd created despite everything they'd done to destroy me. I've already found it, I said finally. I wrote back. No. Whatever you need to say. You should have said it 17 years ago. I hope you find peace, but I don't need to be part of it. My father died 3 months later. Brianna went to the funeral. Not for him, but to support our mother, who she still spoke to occasionally despite everything. I stayed in Portland. She asked about you, Brianna told me afterward. Mom did. She wanted to know if you'd gotten Dad's letter. What did you tell her? That it wasn't my business to share. Boyanasite. She's different now. Smaller somehow without Dad there to back her up. She tried to apologize to me. Did you accept it? I told her I'd think about it. I don't know if I can forgive her. But she's still my mother and she's all alone now. Brianna looked at me carefully. Does that bother you? But I still see her sometimes. No. Your relationship with her is yours to define. It doesn't change anything between us. Good, because you're my sister and you're more important to me than anyone else in this world. 3 years after the wedding, Brianna had a baby. A little girl named Patricia after my foster mother. I was in the delivery room when she was born. And when the nurse handed me my niece for the first time, I cried harder than I had in years. Hi, sweetheart, I whispered to the tiny, perfect human in my arms. I'm your aunt. I'm going to make sure you always know you're wanted and loved and enough just as you are. Brianna reached for my hand. Thank you for coming to my wedding, she said, exhausted and emotional. Thank you for telling the truth. Thank you for giving me permission to do the same. You would have found your way eventually. Maybe, but you made it possible. You showed me what courage looked like. I looked down at baby Patricia, at her tiny fingers and closed eyes, at the absolute trust with which she slept in my arms. This child would never know what it felt like to be unwanted. Brianna and Christopher would make sure of that. And I would be there to remind her every day of her worth. Sometimes healing isn't about reconciliation or forgiveness. Sometimes it's about building something new from the broken pieces. About choosing your family and your truth. Sometimes it's about standing up in a crowded ballroom and saying, this is what really happened. Even when your voice shakes and your hands tremble. I have nightmares sometimes still. I dream about that truck stop, about the taillights disappearing into the desert. But I also dream about Patricia Martin teaching me to make her famous lasagna. About Frank helping me pick out colleges. About Brianna's hand in mine at her wedding. About holding my niece for the first time. The Martins gave me 17 years of love and stability. They showed me what real parents look like, what family is supposed to feel like. They saved my life in every way that matters. My biological parents gave me survival skills, trauma, and a very clear example of who I never wanted to become. Both shaped me, but only one gave me a foundation to build on. I'm 34 now. I live in Portland with a job I love and a sister I'm rebuilding a relationship with. I have a niece who calls me Andy and asks me to read her bedtime stories. I have aunts and cousins who actually want me in their lives. I have friends and colleagues who value me. My mother tried to reach out once more about 6 months after my father's funeral. She sent a letter through Brianna asking if we could meet for coffee. Just the two of us. She wrote that she'd been going to therapy. That she was working on understanding why she'd done what she did. That she wanted to try to make amends. I read the letter 3 times before filing it away. In the folder with all the other documentation from that chapter of my life. Maybe someday I'll be ready for that conversation. Maybe I won't. Either way, it's my choice now and that's what matters. Brianna understood. She's trying, my sister said carefully. I think losing Dad forced her to look at herself differently. But I get why you're not ready. I'm not sure I'll ever fully be ready either. How are those conversations going between you two? Brianna shrugged. Slow, painful. She cries a lot, apologizes constantly, but words are easy. You know, it's the actions that matter. And she can't undo 17 years of abandoning you and controlling me. She can't give us back our childhoods or our relationship as sisters. So we have coffee once a month and I listen and I try to forgive. But I don't know if I'll ever get there completely. You're allowed to set whatever boundaries you need. So are you, she reminded me. Don't feel guilty for protecting yourself. I don't feel guilty anymore. That's perhaps the biggest change. For years after the abandonment, I carried this weight of believing I'd somehow caused it. That if I'd been different or better or quieter, they would have kept me. Therapy helped me understand that nothing I did as a 14-year-old child warranted being left at a truck stop. Nothing. Last month, I was promoted to vice president at my firm. The celebration dinner included Brianna, Christopher, little Patricia, Victoria, and 3 cousins who had become genuine friends. We filled a private room at my favorite restaurant. And when they toasted to my success, I looked around at the table and felt overwhelmingly grateful. Speech, Christopher called out, laughing. I stood up, glass in hand. I'm not good at speeches, but I'll try. 20 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought being abandoned meant I was unlovable, that I'd always be alone. But the truth is, I was freed. I got to choose my family, choose people who saw my worth and reflected it back to me. The Martins started that process, and all of you have continued it. So thank you. Thank you for choosing me back. Brianna was crying again, but she was smiling, too. Always, she said. Always choosing you. Little Patricia, who's 3 now and full of opinions, banged her sippy cup on the table. Auntie, cake now? The table erupted in laughter and the moment shifted back to celebration. But later, as we were leaving, Victoria pulled me aside. Your mother asked me to give you a message, she said quietly. I told her I wouldn't pressure you, but I promised I'd pass it along. What is it? She said to tell you that you were right about everything. She said she's sorry, and she knows sorry isn't enough. But it's all she has. She said she's proud of who you became, even though she had nothing to do with it. Especially because she had nothing to do with it. Victoria's eyes were sad. She's broken, sweetie. What she did to you broke something in her, too, and she's only now realizing it. I absorbed that information slowly. Tell her I hope she finds peace. But I found mine, and it doesn't include her. Victoria nodded. I think she knows that. I think that's part of what's breaking her. Maybe it should have made me feel vindicated, knowing my mother was suffering. Maybe younger me would have celebrated it as justice. But standing there in the restaurant parking lot, I just felt tired. She made her choices, I said finally. We all have to live with ours. The drive home was quiet, the city lights blurring past my windows. I thought about that scared 14-year-old girl. About how she'd survived that first terrible night and all the nights after. About how she'd learned to trust again. To open her heart again, to build a life worth living. She'd be proud of me, I think. Proud of the boundaries I'd set and maintained. Proud of the family I'd chosen. Proud that I hadn't let bitterness poison everything good that came after. When I got home, there was a package waiting on my doorstep. Inside was a framed photo I'd never seen before. It showed me at 17 laughing at something off camera. Sitting between Patricia and Frank Martin at my high school graduation. On the back, in Patricia's handwriting, our daughter, our pride and joy. A note from Brianna was tucked inside. Found this in a box of stuff when I helped Christopher's parents downsize. His mom knew the Martins through some community group. Thought you should have it. Look how loved you were. Look how loved you are. Always, Bri. I set the photo on my mantle. Right next to the picture of Brianna and me at her wedding. Our hands clasped together, our faces streaked with tears and joy. 2 moments, 17 years apart, both marking times when truth won over lies. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Reeves. Proud of you. See you next week. I texted back, absolutely. Healing isn't linear, and it's never really finished. There are still hard days when the past creeps up on me unexpectedly. Days when I see a family loading into a car and feel my chest tighten. Days when I wonder what my life might have been. Like if my parents had been different people. If they'd chosen me the way they should have. But those days are getting fewer and farther between. They're overshadowed by the good days, the great days. The ordinary days where I wake up in my own home, go to a job I worked hard for, and talk to people who genuinely care about me. Yesterday, Patricia asked me if I had a mommy and daddy. Brianna looked panicked, but I just smiled. I had foster parents who were wonderful to me, I told her. Their names were Patricia and Frank. And you're named after Patricia because she was one of the best people I ever knew. Like mommy? Patricia asked, pointing at Brianna. Yes, like mommy. Sometimes family is the people who choose to love you, not just the people you're born to. Patricia seemed satisfied with this answer and went back to her coloring book. Brianna mouthed thank you across the room. These are the moments that matter. Not the confrontation at the wedding, though that needed to happen. Not the exposure of my parents' lies, though that brought its own closure. But these quiet moments of chosen family. Of teaching the next generation that love is a verb, an action, a choice you make every single day. I've been writing this all down, actually. Not for publication or revenge. But for Patricia when she's older. So she'll understand why her aunt and her mother are so close despite the years apart. So she'll know what happened and why it matters. So she'll understand that she comes from survivors. From women who told the truth when it was hard. From people who chose to heal rather than perpetuate cycles of pain. Brianna knows about it. She's writing her own version, her perspective on those years. Someday, we'll give them to Patricia together. A complete picture of what happened and how we found our way back to each other. Do you think she'll understand? Brianna asked me once. I think she'll grow up knowing that family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. It's about truth and trust and choosing each other every day. And that's the most important lesson we can teach her. The wedding invitation that started. All this is in a box in my closet now along with the file Thomas compiled. The police reports, all the documentation of what happened. I keep it not because I need it anymore but because it's part of my story. The part where I took my power back. Next month. I'm speaking at a conference for foster youth who are aging out of the system. The topic is building your chosen family. I'm nervous about it, about being that vulnerable in front of strangers. But I think about all the 14-year-olds out there who feel abandoned and alone, who think being left behind means they're unlovable. And I know I have to do it. Brianna's coming with me. So is Victoria. They'll be in the front row just like they were at my promotion celebration. Just like I was at Patricia's baptism last month. Showing up for each other. That's what family does. Sometimes people ask me if I've forgiven my parents. I've learned to answer honestly. I've forgiven myself for what happened to me. I've released the belief that I caused it or deserved it. As for them, forgiveness isn't something they've earned and I don't owe it to them. I've moved forward, and that's enough. Some people don't like that answer. They want the neat, tidy ending where everyone reconciles and learns and grows together. But life isn't a Hallmark movie. And some hurts are too deep. Some betrayals too complete. You can heal without forgiving. You can build a beautiful life without. Including the people who tried to destroy you. That's my truth. And I'm no longer afraid to speak it. The sun is setting over Portland as I finish writing this. My townhouse is quiet, filled with photos of the family I built. The life I've created. Tomorrow I'll have brunch with Brianna and Patricia. Next week is my monthly dinner with Victoria. The week after, I'm flying to Arizona to visit the Martins' graves. Something I do twice a year to leave flowers and sit and tell them about my life. I'm not that scared 14-year-old. Anymore sitting at a truck stop wondering if she's worth coming back for. I know my worth now. I fought for it, built it, defended it. Nobody gave it to me. I claimed it myself. And if that wedding invitation hadn't arrived 3 years ago, I might never have gotten the closure I needed. I might have spent the rest of my life wondering, carrying the weight of unanswered questions. Instead, I walked into that ballroom, told my truth, and walked out free. My parents lost 2 daughters the day they drove away from that truck stop. They just didn't realize it for 17 years. By the time they understood what they'd done, it was too late to fix it. Some mistakes are too big, some choices too final. But Brianna and I found each other again. We're rebuilding what was stolen from us. One coffee date and phone call and Sunday dinner at a time. We're teaching Patricia that family means showing up, telling the truth, and choosing love even when it's hard. That's the real revenge, I suppose. Not the public exposure at the wedding, though that was satisfying in its own way. The real revenge is living well, loving fully, and building something beautiful from the ashes of what they tried to destroy. I survived. I thrived. And I did it without them. That's my story. That's my truth. And I'm finally completely at peace with all of it. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to leave a comment and share your own experiences or reflections. And if you'd like to follow more stories like this, make sure to subscribe. Your support means more than you know.